Hey, this is Collectibles.com Unscripted. I'm Dietrich.
And I'm Alex.
When you think of action figures, your mind probably goes straight to the G.I. Joes that you played with as a kid, probably in a box somewhere gathering dust in your mom's garage or maybe your grandma's attic. Or maybe you've seen every Marvel movie and have a collection of comic book heroes that would put Sheldon Cooper to shame. And then there's Kyle Peterson, an action figure collector with thousands of action figures in his collection. He's also a popular YouTuber with over 40,000 subscribers and 4,000 videos focusing on, yeah, you guessed it, action figure collectibles. We're excited to have Kyle join us now. Welcome.
Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Excited to have this conversation. Dietrich, do you want to start?
Yeah, happy to. So Kyle, I actually noticed you've got two YouTube channels. Kyle Peterson 1980, we'll talk about that, and Kyle Peterson 2.0. Are you upgrading yourself? Is that an upgraded version?
It's a change of pace, that's for sure. But yeah, it's overflow. Basically, I got so much content. You know, I put out 4 videos every single day. So I got so much content and it's just like too much for one channel. So I said, let's do a second channel where I get a little crazier and a little off the mark every once in a while.
Oh, it's a good problem to have.
Did I hear it correctly? So 4 videos today. Wow.
Yeah, I've been doing 4 videos a day for maybe 8 months and 3 videos a day for, I don't know, 2 years now, something like that.
Do you have a sleep or like did you
Not really.
transform yourself in an action figure?
Yeah, that's one thing people always say to me is, oh, you sleep and stuff. And people think like YouTube's my full-time job. I mean, no, I got a 60-hour-a-week day job, you know, and people always say, how do you do all that? And I said, well, if you want to do something bad enough, you find time to do it. So that's pretty much my motto at life. Well,
you know, our listeners probably hear the same thing, but the word applies again. It's passion. You're driven by passion, right? This ain't a job. It's about talking about your passion. So for those that may only be listening to the podcast, not having the view, I do have to describe you. Kyle, you look like a fucking rock star. You know, it's and you're wearing the Sting t-shirt. You're seated in front of, I don't know, like what looks like hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, right? I mean, what do you got there?
Yeah, it's Mattel Elites behind me in these Detolf cases. So I have every single Mattel Elite figure that's been made so far. So yeah, I got them among many other things, but yeah, that's kind of my background for most of my videos.
Wow. Well, awesome. Before we dive into questions, Alex and I, we always kind of like to kick things off with some fun facts that we put together. Mm-hmm. Some of this may be well known to you already, but for those that are just kind of learning about action figures, this is probably a good launching point. So let's start with the basics. What defines an action figure? It's a posable character model figure, commonly made of plastic. Yes, I am reading this. And often based upon characters from a film, comic book, military, video game, or television program. The term action figure was first used in 1964 by the Hasbro company to describe their new toy, G.I. Joe. Comic book heroes, superheroes were first made into action figures in the 1970s. In 1977, 20th Century Fox gave a toy license to the Kenner Company to manufacture action figures for their new movie, drumroll, Star Wars. The success of the film greatly expanded the action figure market. Then, in 1983, federal regulations prohibiting the creation of children's programming based on toys were lifted. This opened a new era in action figures. Yeah, God bless America, right? Open up. For the post-production, we should throw in Austin Powers saying, yay, capitalism or something, right? The Mattel company took advantage of this opportunity and created a cartoon series based on their 1981 action figure line called He-Man and Masters of the Universe. These toys were extremely successful and sold over 55 million units that year. And finally, here's something I never knew, but I'm sure Kyle does. The actor with the most characters made into action figures is Samuel L. Jackson with 11. Clancy Brown has 10. Gary Oldman and Johnny Depp have 9 apiece. Gary Oldman, we'll talk about that. And Angelina Jolie has 7. So those are the fun facts. But let's let's start off with the cordial intros. Kyle, where do you call home?
I'm in Des Moines, Iowa, of all places,
Ah.
outside of Des Moines, a suburb of Des Moines. So right in the heart of the Midwest.
God love you.
Yeah.
Is that you're born and raised there, or?
Yep. Born and raised, lived in South Dakota for a while and stuff. But yeah, went to college in Iowa. I've been in Iowa. I mean, I travel for work, so I feel like I'm all over the Midwest. But yeah, this is where I try to lay my head most nights.
for your when you're on tour with the band, right?
Of course, yeah, exactly. When I'm making the circuit,
Or
you're
maybe
wearing a
WWE.
Sting T-shirt, so I could tease. How long have you been touring with Sting? But we'll leave that.
exactly.
So Kyle, when did it all started? Like, tell us the story. Like, when do you even remember your first action figure? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you brought it up in the little intro right there. I mean, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, I think, was a tipping point for a lot of kids that grew up in the 80s. I mean, that was the big bang for me. I remember that was my first ever action figure memories when I was a little kid, getting He-Man figures. And then it snowballed and progressed from there into G.I. Joe, which is a huge passion of mine, and then wrestling figures and, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and everything in between, Star Wars, Marvel Legends, you name it. So I'm kind of a Renaissance man, a little bit of everything in my collection.
And do you have the first one still with you?
I don't have my first childhood stuff. I got to that weird point where a lot of, not just action figure collectors, but a lot of collectors, you're getting ready to go to college. You got to move into a little apartment or a dorm. And you're like, okay, what am I going to do here? And you make a dumb decision over like a year-long span. And I sold my entire childhood collection. I only kept one piece. It was the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, pretty famous one from back in the 80s. I still have that to this day. And then you start rebuilding your collection, I guess, later on.
Did you have any sort of marking on it that might reveal it's yours? If maybe.
I was amazing. I was one of those weird kids that was so nice with my figures. I had no marks, no damages on figures, no broken figures. I treated my stuff so good as a kid. And I got really good money for when I sold. When I was going to college, so I actually bought a used, like a year-old Jeep Grand Cherokee. That's how much I got out of it.
Wow.
So that was a great decision at the time. Now I regret it all these years later.
Would it have been something like, I don't know, like Rolls Royce now by the time, if you would
maybe,
have kept it?
Maybe a Ferrari, possibly. I don't know. I'd have to do the math.
I like your thinking, Alex. I like. Well, your treatment of collectibles. It seems like you were destined to be a collector, knowing how to preserve value. Not beating him up.
And my dad was a big collector too, so we kind of got the bug going from there. I mean, my dad's been on my channel before as well, doing unboxings and stuff with me, but he was more into the starting lineup collections back in the day. So that was kind of his thing. So I was getting, X-Men, G.I. Joe, wrestling. He's getting starting lineup. We're going to Targets, Walmarts, you name it, hunting stuff, going to conventions, going to toy shows. And so it's kind of been with me my whole life.
Wow, that's terrific. So you said unboxing. I got a double question here for you. So the origination story, you may have already answered it, because it sounds like Dad was a bit of the catalyst, so some quality father-son time. But why action figures? And how many of them, since your childhood one, still in boxes? Like how? I can see a lot behind you, but
yeah. So yeah, I always feel like being a kid of the 80s, that was the prime time for action figures. You talked about it a little bit, all the cartoons, and every cartoon had a toy property to it. In the 80s, pretty much every parent was working, so kids spent a lot of time alone. We didn't have a million TV channels back then, and you were kind of, okay, you got these 12 channels that show cartoons or whatever, and here it is. There's G.I. Joe, there's Mask, there's Transformers, there's Ghostbusters, there's He-Man. And you're kind of just, as a kid, naturally into that. And then your friends are into that, and it kind of just snowballs from that. So that's kind of, I think, the origin story there. And I think most kids from the 80s collected something. You were pretty much involved into something. So that was kind of the origin story, at least there. What was the other part of the question? It was...
and boxes. How many do you still keep?
So that's one I get a lot, is like... I get this a lot from people, is like, if you keep them in the box, they're worth a lot more. And I have a pretty good, generous amount in the box still. There's certain collections I do. But to me, it's great to know all this stuff has value. But at the same time, it's about the joy of the time, being in the moment and enjoying it. I mean, and that's for me, the passion of collecting, the passion of action figures. I love picking it up, hunting it at the store. I love, looking at it in the package. I love discussing in my videos the packaging, what I like about it and stuff. I love opening it up. I love getting the old see you later. I love going through it. I love displaying it. I love putting it somewhere. So there's a lot of fun throughout on that. You can still get fun through Mint on Card, but it's not as fun for me. And that's what it comes down to. It's my collection, my rules, just like anybody else's collection. It's your collection, your rules. Get the enjoyment out of it. And then the other thing is, hey, I have it's been years since I counted, but I'm well over 10,000 figures in my collection. Nobody's got enough room for all that kind of stuff. I mean, I built my house around my collection. I actually built the area. I put secret doors in. I put all kinds of fun stuff in here.
So don't reveal the secrets now.
That's right. It's secret. But there's only so much room. There's only so much room for anybody.
Funny, Alex, I know you've got a question, but just segue about building your house and being in boxes. Alex and I, we actually had a podcast with the world's largest Monopoly game collector, and those are by virtue all in boxes. So you can imagine how he's challenged to.
He was surrounded by boxes. I don't know. Maybe Kyle's going to turn out the camera as everything is in boxes around him. But yeah. And Kyle, do you actually, I'm always a bit paranoid about when I have valuable items, obviously, and then how do you store them? Do you insure them, or, do you keep the valuable item? Can you hear me well, guys?
Because you froze for a second there, Alex.
Okay.
So you just
let me repeat the question. So yeah, Cal, you said you have still plenty of boxes, and I collect also watches, sports memorabilia stuff, cards, and when I buy a Grail piece or whatever, like an item which is more expensive than the others, I kind of I'm a bit worried about this item, being around me, and I want to have this item. I want to look at it. I want to showcase it. Do you insure your stuff, or do you keep your valuable stuff somewhere, in the vaults? Vaults are pretty on vogue right now, so everybody's putting their stuff in vaults, which I'm not a big fan, generally speaking, because I want to have my collections around me. But what's your opinion about it?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have the same opinion to you on the vault. I feel and I'm the same way. If I have a collectible, you have to have rules in a collection. And my rule always is I'm not going to put a storage unit. I'm not going to put it, if I can't display it, I don't need it. So that's kind of how my rules go. But yeah, my dad actually was a CEO of an insurance company. So that kind of helps with a lot of that kind of stuff. He kind of can direct some traffic for me. I mean, he helps me in a lot of that kind of stuff. But I do have, like a lot of collectors, especially hardcore collectors, you got some pieces that are, worth the amount of a down payment of a house or a new vehicle, and it's weird because I have a piece that is extremely rare and it's almost priceless because one hasn't went for sale in many, many years. So I don't know what the true value is right now. But I look at that one and I love it, but I'm I hate to even have it in my collection. Sometimes I'm scared to even look at it or touch it the wrong way or something. It's just, I don't know. It's one of those weird things. So
are you willing to reveal what category? What is it?
Yeah, it's a He-Man. It's a Masters of the Universe Classics Spirit of King Grayskull. I think there's only 31 in the world, and it was only for Mattel executives.
Wow.
So it's pretty rare. I don't know. I haven't seen one sell for many, many years. And it's to the point where, you couldn't just put a buy it now auction. It would have to go to a real auction to find out what it's even worth.
Wow. That's an awesome piece. Funny you said you're afraid to even touch it. Speaking of that, I don't know why, but I keep having all these pop culture references. I'm thinking about the scene in Step Brothers, "Don't touch my drum set." That's sort of, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but I see your display case there, and it's amazing. You've got thousands on display. Do you ever touch them? Do you let anyone else touch them, or do they get?
Yeah, I have two daughters. My daughter just turned 13 last week. My other daughter's 8 years old, and the whole time they were kids, I said, "Hey, anything here you want to grab, go for it." I wouldn't let them grab that one He-Man I was telling you about, but 99% of the stuff, if they wanted to touch any of it or play with it, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's to be enjoyed. Obviously I wouldn't let them destroy it or anything, but having two girls, not really interested, more interested in Barbies and things like that, as you can imagine. So,
yeah.
But I do a lot of a lot of photography. I do a lot of deep dives in the history of collection on especially wrestling figures and things. I mean, I just recently wrote a book that just came out.
Hey,
It's
hold
on
that up
Amazon.
again. Yeah, what is it? What's it called?
Show it.
It's called The Complete Guide to the Jakks Classic Superstars line. So it's a pretty famous line that really changed the history of action figures. I just came out with it last Friday, March 1st, and we'll be on Barnes & Noble here in a couple of days as well. It's about 700 pages. I mean, everything in this total line. So
we'll be sure to add a link to that. Okay, that's very cool. Yep.
Yeah, so that just came out. So it's doing well. It's the #1 bestseller in 3 different categories and things like that. So it's been very well received. And I've been doing videos on my YouTube every single Tuesday for about 5 years on this line, going through the history of it and stuff like that. And so pretty fun experience, labor of love if there ever was one, for sure.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
All these figures I grab out and I'll do histories of the lines. I'll do things like that. So
how do you get your knowledge then? Like, are you reading a lot, trying to, are there forums? What's your #1 source for truly unique knowledge, like inside kind of like nobody knows knowledge? So how do you get around that?
Like the book here, I mean, a lot of people say, Kyle, how do you have a complete classic superstars collection? I have 2 of them. I have a loose set and a mint on card set. I actually have a room dedicated to it, the walls, every figure in there. And people's like, how did you afford that? How did you get that set? How did you get all this knowledge? Well, I collected it as the line happened. So it's pretty easy to pick up a line as it's going on, but it's the 20th anniversary of that line, this year. So I built the knowledge as being in the store, going to Toys R Us, Targets, Walmarts, wherever, knowing what's going on, knowing the history, knowing this was a Toys R Us exclusive. So just a lot of it is just basically my whole lifetime of being an action figure collector. I mean, ever since I was 3 years old, if I was good, did the right thing at school, whatever, did my chores, every Friday I got one figure. And it was like that my whole life pretty much. So it's just a lot of knowledge. And then, of course, social media is so easy to learn stuff now, find out history of toy lines. I've been lucky enough to make a lot of good connections to people in the industry. So if I have a question on something, I can reach out to those people, talk about that. So yeah, it's just kind of one of those things. And it goes back, we said it earlier, it's about the passion. If you're passionate about something, I mean, it's like it just sticks. And I remember teachers as a kid would always tell my parents at conferences, if Kyle would just spend the time on math and science and stuff that he does on wrestling, baseball, action figures, he'd be a genius. But you like what you like, you know what you don't. I didn't like math or science.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Did you want to go next one?
Sure. Let me think here. I did make a few notes. Since you are so well versed, let's go a little granular. Your focus, you've mentioned, He-Man, G.I. Joe, wrestling. Do you focus on one subset more than any other? Like, I mean, do you Marvel, DC Comics, wrestling? How would of your entire collection? I mean, what's the breakdown? Roughly?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly wrestling. I mean, most people do know me as the wrestling collector guy, which is funny because G.I. Joe is kind of my #1 action figure passion and always has been. But wrestling is a close #2. But yeah, it's pretty much wrestling is most of it. I mean, I have a pretty significant wrestling figure collection. And wrestling has, always been around making figures and things. There's been a lot of figures. And even to this day, they pump out more figures than any other toy lines every single year between Mattel and Jazzwares and the third party. I mean, there's a lot going on. So that's usually wrestling. But yeah, basically, I'd say wrestling, He-Man, G.I. Joe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are probably the big 4 for me. I do DC McFarlane stuff, Thundercats, a lot of Super 7 stuff. So I'm pretty versed in pretty much everything. Everybody says, Kyle, you collect everything. Well, don't collect everything, but I collect a lot of stuff. There's no doubt.
Yeah. And wrestling, who was the first wrestler to enter your collection? Because I'll admit, I watched a little bit of wrestling when I was a kid, and I think of who were some of the, to throw some names out, some of the 1980s
Hulk Hogan,
names.
maybe.
Hulk Hogan. That's right. Hulk Hogan. Yeah.
Andre the Giant. I mean, all that stuff. So I'm about the same era. So it's funny. I still remember my first ever wrestling figure. And I remember, kids at school, that's usually how most kids get into wrestling. It's like friends at school. Did you see this show or whatever? And then it, snowballs from there. And I remember, hey dad, I want to get a wrestling figure this week. And I remember specifically going to Toys R Us. It was the old LJN figures from the 80s, the big rubber ones. And I go there and all they have is a wrestler. And you guys probably don't even remember this guy. His name was Outback Jack. He was there for like a cup of coffee, did absolutely nothing, and obviously his figure didn't sell. So that's all they had. It was just like 10 Outback Jack figures. Poor little Kyle, and well, it's a wrestling figure. I want it. But usually if you're buying a wrestling figure, you need at least 2 figures. What are you going to do with just one? And I was stuck for about a week with just one figure, and it was Outback Jack, one of the most forgotten wrestling figures, wrestlers really of all time.
Where is he today?
Right over that case down here a little ways. But yeah, and in Australia somewhere, hanging out.
Yeah, in the Outback.
Exactly.
And do you like in action figures? Do you have like, in comics you have reprints, and in cards sometimes you also have reprints, or it's not a big thing in cards, but in comics it is. And so, do you have something like that, like where it's not a reprint, but they kind of do a new version of the exactly same looking action figure?
That is an extremely timely question right now, as I'm going to address that in this week. I do a toy news video every single week on my channel. I'm going to address that because I've been talking about this for years, that a lot of people are like, oh, I want this Grail item. I want this Grail item action figure or whatever. And I always say you got to be extremely careful, because we have to remember Mattel, Hasbro, Super 7, McFarlane, whoever it is, whatever company it is, we always have to take that business, put the business hat on, take the business step back. It is a business. If they see an opportunity to make money, guess what? They're going to do it. And last night, there's a company called Ringside Collectibles out there. They do all the wrestling figures. Pretty big place out there. Use discount code Kyle, save yourself 10%. But they do a real good job out there of stuff. Well, they just had an exclusive drop of a bunch of old figures from 10 years ago or so, let's say. Some really pricey figures, updated with new packaging, things like that. But it is still the same figures with just a few changes, and it's really devalued the old ones. The old ones that were going for $200 some. Well, I can get these brand new ones for $25. I updated bells and whistles, things like that. So there is quite a few re-releases in the action figure game, and it's a dangerous thing. And that's why I always say, when people say, well, I want to start investing in action figures, it's fun to invest. I mean, it's fun for me that, hey, I know someday I can get some money out of this kind of thing. But I always tell people, be careful with action figures, because, you're probably better off investing in your 401k and your retirement than you are sucking it all down on a He-Man figure you think is going to be worth the fortune in the future.
We know where you go with this. You're just trying to clear the market, just trying to, thin the herd. After this show, you don't want sales picking up. I want to ask another dual question here. One, you've kind of already answered about the boxes and where do you store them. I mean, I just keep looking at this amazing display that you have in the back. For all collectors, not just those with action figures, but anyone who collects. I mentioned before we started here that I'm a lunchbox collector. So even with just a couple hundred, it takes up a lot of space. What do you got there behind you? I mean, is that glass, plexiglass? I mean, it's custom build. What's the story?
It's IKEA Detolf is what it's called. So it's from IKEA, obviously. So it's just a bunch of them. I think I've got about 28 of them down here is what I have. And that's just for my wrestling figures. And then I use Billy bookcases, which I'm sure you've heard of those too. I got those all over, and I got some custom design stuff. I got all kinds of different stuff going on. But yeah, it is all Detolfs all the way around me, around the room.
Let's talk a little bit about your YouTube channel. I mean, because the prodigious content that you say you produce, like what's most popular?
It goes back and forth. I mean, wrestling's popular, G.I. Joe's popular, whatever's timely is usually popular. Like just recently, the crowdfunder from the Masters of the Universe, the Eternia playset came out. That was a very popular video because, a lot of people wanted to see what this big crowdfunder that took a year and a half to come out, a very expensive playset, what that looked like. Mm-hmm. So that stuff's pretty popular. Toy hunts are very popular. I do a toy hunt every week of just documenting what's in the stores every single week. That's pretty popular. And then on the weekends, I do a video called The Toy News, where I really just break down the toy news of the week, give my opinion on it, put on the business hat because, I have a guy that I don't work in the action figure industry, but I'm kind of adjacent in retail with some major brands that are worldwide. I'm an executive for a company, so I understand kind of the business model and how it works, because I always say you could be selling action figures, you could be selling a hammer, you could sell bread. It's still the same thing, how you sell it to your store buyers. And, I've called on Target headquarters before. I've called on Walmart headquarters. So I kind of understand the ebbs and flows of stuff. And, in a lot of collectors, not just action figures, people think, oh, why would they do this? Why would they do this? But I just think the thing that's missing from most commentary is the business reason why. So with my experiences in my day job and all that, I can kind of say, well, this is the reason this isn't exclusive to this store, because it helps get other products of the main line into the store by giving Target, for example, an exclusive. So those are pretty popular videos as well. And I do every Sunday a weekly purchases video where I go through everything I bought for the week.
Wow. Okay.
Do you ever sell anything, or are you just a buyer and order?
I do sell, and a lot of people say, "Oh, Kyle, you buy all this stuff or you review this stuff. Do you sell it right after? You probably sell it." I'm like, no, I'm a collector at heart. I have a passion for this, so I do, like anybody. There's stuff that ebbs and flows out of my collection. I just recently get rid of a big collection recently on a few things, so I do sell from time to time, but more buy than sell for sure.
Sure, yeah. And do you trade things like in trading cards? We trade cards, right? And we like to trade stuff. Is it a thing in action figures?
It is. People do it. I rarely do it. I mean, it's tough to find. It's just tough to find. I guess no different than cards, maybe, but it's tough to find sometimes equal value on stuff. I mean, I don't do much trading. It's kind of tough to do.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And I want to ask, I heard about this stories. I can hear what it exactly was. I think it was Star Wars action figures from South America. I think it was, I don't know if it was Brazil or Peru or something weird happened that they got those figures delivered there, and then it got canceled. They were not allowed to be sold there. And then so they meant to be destroyed, but obviously, many of them were not destroyed. And so they are currently really, not currently, but just generally speaking, they are very, very rare. And then do you have stories like that among, not necessarily Star Wars, but any other action figures?
Yeah, there is a lot of that, I guess, in any toy line there. There's a lot of, stuff that was made extremely limited for certain people, or, canceled stuff. I mean, in the wrestling world, there's a famous one. It's just recently here. It was called Chief Jay Strongbow. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's an old time wrestler. It was kind of, I guess, cancel culture is what got him there, because, wrestling's weird. I mean, it's weird it gets canceled because wrestling kind of is like acting and stuff. But this guy wrestled in the 60s and 70s as a chief, an Indian chief. Well, he was actually an Italian guy. He was an Italian guy. He played the character of an Indian. Well, they released his figure here as a Walmart exclusive. And then cancel culture got in there and said, wait a minute, he can't be doing this with an Indian. And I don't know if anybody really cared that much.
Yeah. So it was recently, you're saying?
It was about, was it a year and a half ago, something like that. So that figure got canceled, and some got out, however, though. And they went to there was a Pennsylvania liquidation store that got 2 cases of them. It didn't know what they had, and they sold them. And there's a few more floating around. I actually have one in my collection, but it goes for $2,000 some at this point. But
so
there's been
cancel culture
like that
helped increase the value.
It pretty much did. Yeah. I mean, most of them were supposed to be destroyed, but like you were just saying, your example, it got out. A few got out. So,
Alex, your question, it reminded me, I think, not to deviate, but I think, wasn't it like Funko Pop? Something like they created a whole bunch and it went to landfill and then they had to dig it out. Like there's something there about it. Reminds me.
Yeah. And how often do those exclusives are coming out? I'm sorry, in cards, back then you had 101s, so 505s, and they were pretty rare. If you 101s maybe existed I don't know, 1-2 times in a whole set. Now if you since the boom of all the collectibles and trading cards specifically 3-4 years ago, they print now you can find I don't know 10 to 20 101s in one set, and they now have hundreds of variations instead of before maybe 5 or 20. So do you have do you see something like that in action figures? And how often do you have those exclusive editions? I don't want to say the one-on-ones. I don't even know if something like that exists, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite as extreme as trading cards. I understand trading cards. I'm not an expert, but I collected for the 80s, 90s and all that. And I stay abreast of what's going on over there with the 101s, and you'll have the different borders. You'll have 5 cards, and stuff. So I get all that stuff. It's not as extreme in action figures. Mattel, for like wrestling, for example, there is a Chase Rare Edition in pretty much every set, and it's usually a paint variant. They don't really disclose, at least for the Mattel WWE ones, they don't disclose how many are made of those. But then there's Jazzwares, that's their competition with the AEW toy line. They have rare Chase editions in every set. And they're one of 3,000, one of 500, or one of 5,000. So not super, super extreme. There has been one of 100s. I mean, there's been one of 3s. There's been one of 1s. There's been some of that kind of stuff, but it's not as extreme as cards. But then exclusives, though, that is what really runs the action figure business. I mean, Amazon, Targets, Walmarts, I mean, Entertainment Earth, Big Bad Toy Stores, online brick and mortar stores, those all get exclusives. And it's something to drive traffic to Target, drive traffic to Walmart. And then, you know, that helps get their normal everyday lines in the stores. But there's a lot of exclusives of a lot of toy lines. G.I. Joe, for example, like Target has the Tiger Force exclusive, which is basically repaints, but you can only get them at Target. Well, Walmart has the Night Force repaints, and every company does things like that on a pretty regular basis.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Yeah.
So Kyle, returning to the term passion, the driving force behind every collector in the collectibles industry in general, thinking about your channel and all the content that you produce, the comments that come in. I don't know if you ever, read live comments during your shows, but, there's very opinionated, right? Collectors tend to be opinionated. Do you ever get into any sort of, dare I say, nerd battles on over, which franchise rules over the other, or which is better, more valuable? What's some of the controversy that stirs things up?
Not really. I mean, I'm a very positive person. Like, this is fun for me. There's a lot of YouTube channels and there's a lot of videos and cards, everything else, lunchboxes even. It's crazy if you look at YouTube, people having meltdowns and negative videos and things. Those will get tons of views and stuff. But I feel a lot of times they're forced and a lot of times they're phony. And for me, I do have meltdown videos. There's nothing more enraging to me when I'm opening a figure and it crumbles out of the box. I mean, I have people live for those meltdowns, and it's bound to happen. And I always get mad and hot, but I'm like, hey, anything that's mass produced, there's a chance something's going to break. It's just the way it is. I mean, I always make that known, but I just hate that it happened to me. But though, there's a lot of negativity on the internet. I don't know if you guys knew this. That's a true thing. I've heard.
Yeah.
There's a little bit.
Rumored. It's rumored.
Yeah. I keep it pretty positive on my channel. I'm pretty happy about it because this is fun for me. This is a passion. And guess what? I'm not going to buy stuff I don't like. I'm not going to talk about things I don't like. There's only so many hours in the day. I want to be surrounded by fun things. And that's one thing about my channel. I don't really get a whole lot of negative comments very often. Every once in a while, I do a weekly top 5 or a top 10 list. And some people will say, I can't believe you don't have this figure on there. Why don't you have that one on? Well, it's my list. That's why I always say in the videos, it's my list. Put your list in the comments. I can't be wrong. You can't be wrong because it's our list. I mean, So that's about as negative as it gets, but it is funny. That does lead. My first ever YouTube video was a collection tour of my house, and I'm about to 4-year anniversary on my channel here.
Nice.
But the very first comment I got, and I can laugh about it, and it was funny at the time, but it was, I hope your whole house burns down with your family inside it.
Oh, holy
That was the
shit.
first comment I ever got. And can you imagine? Most people probably say, this probably isn't for me.
Wait. Just like, I mean, was there more to it? Was there like a context given?
No, that was just the first. It was a collection tour of my whole house walking through. That was the first comment. I hope your house. So that's the internet for you. And that's the worst comment I ever got in my life. And, I don't think that guy, whoever said it, I don't think he really believed it, but it kind of made me like, wow, this is a wild place out here in the comment section.
Yeah.
Congrats to you that you kept up and you're now where you are, right? So,
but besides that,
awesome.
I don't really get a whole lot of negativity around things. I really don't. So it's a pretty friendly channel, pretty passionate, pretty love of toys, and I think most people that watch are in that same boat.
Yeah. It's subjective, right? I mean, value. Well, I mean, certain values aren't subjective, but what is personal, it is just that, right? I mean, whatever you want, whatever you treasure more is the most valuable. So, Alex, you got something?
Yeah, I want to talk about the community. So like, you have almost 40,000, or you have 40,000 subscribers on YouTube. Like, where do you think those guys are from? Like, is it all US? because you mainly talk about US action figures. And like, can you tell me more about the general market? Like, is it like a worldwide thing? Like, I know there is a lot going on in Asia, in Japanese action figures, or just general figures. So like, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it's a worldwide deal for sure. But obviously, being based in America, majority of people are in America. Canada, America, the UK, that's pretty much the big stuff. But I hear from people all over the world every single day. I mean, pretty much everywhere in the world. I mean, people collect all over. I do. My heart goes out to collectors in, far off places of the world where it's, I know how lucky I am. I got, 22 Walmarts and Targets within quick driving distance of me.
Yeah.
There's people that have no stores, no opportunities. They got to go online. They got to spend a fortune for stuff. I mean, it is where you are, but yeah, it's definitely worldwide. There's people that collect. I hear from people all over the world, especially with the new book that came out. I've heard a lot of great comments from people all over the world where, hey, I could never get these figures. They were never in my area, but now it feels like I have them because I got the whole guidebook for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because you see like, all the comic collectors spread across the world. Trading cards is more like US thing, but interesting. That's truly interesting. So, but you are focused mainly on US action figures, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do get stuff from overseas, but yeah, I mean, I would say probably, I don't know what percentage is kind of US based. I mean, it might be made over in a factory in China or something, but it's pretty much a US type of thing for the most part. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why it gets so expensive for somebody in Australia or, wherever, India it comes from that side of the world and it goes to America, then it's got to come all the way back to ship to them. So,
yeah.
Hey, Alex, I'm looking at notes here. I think this may have been one of yours, but I want to snag it because it does tie in perfectly to what Kyle just shared. So let's talk about strategy a little bit. I'm sure that our listeners will, if they're already action figure collectors or thinking about getting into it, this might be helpful. Do you have a secret playbook for how you acquire things? Like, I mean, particularly snagging the elusive limited edition action figures, right? I mean, what's the game plan? I mean, with what you can reveal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give all my secrets away.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty open about my secrets. Like everybody says, oh, how do you find stuff at the stores? How do you always find these things? Well,
subscribe to my channel, and then you're gonna.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Subscribe, and I'll tell you all the secrets. I'll give my handbook out. But no, for action figures, if you're looking for new figures and stuff, the real key is knowing the pattern. That's why I would say know the pattern of your stores. If you have a Walmart and a Target by your house, go there every single day for 2 weeks. Look at the stock conditions. You can figure out a pattern, and you can figure out, I know the Walmart by my house every Monday is when they stock toys. So I know Monday afternoon I'll swing in there, and it's all a game of patterns. And I've got like I said, 20 some stores around me. For the most part, I know the patterns and I know the release schedule, and I kind of just know. It's all about just paying attention. And that goes back to me and my dad as a little kid, knowing the West Coast of LA or, the California would get the new starting lineup figures back in the day. And we knew exactly it'd be 2 Fridays later, we would get it in the Midwest. And like clockwork, Friday after work, we'd go there, bam, there it was. So it's knowing your patterns. That's the biggest key. And then if you're looking for old vintage stuff, it's harder than ever before. I guess no different than any other collectible with eBay and everything else. People know what they have, or they can look up at their fingertips. So the crazy deals are few and far between. They still come up from time to time, and it's an amazing feeling when you get them. But I think it is really looking at, Facebook marketplaces and stuff like that, where, grandma had a bunch of toys and she doesn't know what they are. And here's $5. I mean, for this whole box there. And then there's toy shows. I mean, out there, there's the Kane County Toy Show outside of Chicago, which is the biggest in the United States. It's massive. There's a lot of deals to be found out there, a lot of things like that. So
any drive-bys though, like estate sales, anything that you've ever just uncovered?
That's funny is one of my buddies, Midwest Professional Wrestling Gage Octane, as he's known on the channel here, he actually went to an estate sale, and I couldn't believe it. I about fell when he sent me the pictures. It was those old LJN, those rubber figures from back in the day, the wrestling ones. There was the final set only available in Canada, in this little hole in the wall town. They had it at the estate sale, and he got this the Rick Rude and a few of these other black card ones. They were loose, but he got them for like $5 a piece. And I mean, they go for $300+. I mean, and a lot of people say, oh, that's not real. That's not real. Oh, I can tell you it's real. So there's still things like that. Even to this day, they're fewer and far between than they used to be, but it's still possible.
Yeah. That's motivational right there.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Do you have any other question? Because I have one. You know, if
don't do the finale yet. Like that's
okay. I'll keep it for the end. Okay, all right.
Yeah, because then Kyle may run. So let's.
Yeah, Kyle. So you know what's. You know, do you organize your collection somehow? You know, and is it only like kind of like I don't know. Not only, but like, is it around your room, or do you have some pieces of it written down in a sheet so you don't? Because I guess like you can even forget like what you already have, like, and you buy it twice, so like duplicates could be a thing after so many pieces, right?
Yeah. How do you track it? How do you track it all?
You know, it's wild you say that, because I have an amazing memory for my collection. I might forget that I'm supposed to meet my buddy for lunch this afternoon, but I have an amazing collection, and it helps too because I have that brain, and this is for a lot of collectors. I mean, you guys might have this as well. Is I'm a completist. I have to have everything of the line. So pretty much every toy line I collect, I have to have every single one. And that's where I'm at. So I have every single one. So it's like, I don't really have to remember, because I know, hey, the Mattel retros, I have every one. So if I see one for sale, well, I know I have it. So there is a few pieces out there. Those are in my notes in my phone, and obviously my memory. So I know if I see them, but at this point, I'm pretty much just buying new things. There's very few old pieces I'm looking for. There's only a handful. So a good problem, bad problem, I guess, depending on how you look. Like you miss that old hunt on that kind of stuff, but I also look forward to new stuff coming.
Well, I imagine our audience, all collectors, are thinking about that. You know, how do you even with the lunchboxes? I mean, I would end up sometimes buying duplicates, or you start going to like perfectionism, like, oh, this lunchbox is a little dented. Can I find one even better? Because I'll sell the other one, but turns out,
and we call that a placeholder in the action figure game. Maybe it's the same for you, but I got a damaged card. It's a little dinged. It's a placeholder until I find a better one. And
but then you end up holding all the placeholders, and I'm in that situation. But before our time is almost up. I mean, this has been great. I have one thought, because when you talked about it sort of as part of your strategy, and I love the way you phrase it, so know the patterns. Like that's profound. Know the patterns. I mean, it is a deep thought. I mean, that applies to a lot of things, but since you are prolific, I mean, well, actually, two things I wanted to ask. You ever get any sort of heads up, or, do you have any communications with any of the, I won't mention names, but any of the major manufacturers? Because I imagine that, with new releases coming, that someone like you, would be a great ambassador. So I don't know if you ever get any early editions, or they send you something. So that's one. Then kind of more related just to your general collection there, because I just continue to marvel looking at it. Guinness Book of World Records. Do you know who has more action figures than you? Or does that even exist? Has that category even been fulfilled yet? And could you qualify?
Possibly. I guess I never thought about it too deep there, but I think there wasn't that Star Wars guy like in California had like every Star Wars. I forget what that, he was pretty famous. I mean, I think he just recently passed away though, but I think there's millions of Star Wars stuff as we know. He had a whole like compound of that kind of stuff. So I would think if there is one, it's probably him, just because there's so much Star Wars, and he had everything Star Wars memorabilia. So he was pretty locked in there. But yeah, I can't think of anything besides that. And then what was the other one? It was
manufacturers,
yeah. So it's funny. It's one misconception, I think, of the world out there. Oh, he has a YouTube channel. He gets all of his figures for free. I would love it. Hey, manufacturers, send them to me for free. I will definitely take them. I got no shame about it. But of course, I do get a few things for free every once in a while. I mean, it's kind of a benefit of it. And people, like any industry, oh, it's not fair. You got it for free. Well, it's not. Is it really free if you have to do a video on it? You have to do that kind of stuff. I mean, there's terms with that. So I'm definitely grateful for anything I do get, but I can tell you, and I say it on my channel all the time, this isn't a money making channel. This is me putting it back into my collection. All the money, everything goes right back into it, right in there. And I mean, so I do get stuff from time to time. I mean, every once in a while, like Mattel will send me, hey, here's the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. We're going to send it to you beforehand, give it a review before people have to buy it. And I always appreciate that. It's so cool to get stuff like that, especially, with the new book I just put in here, Jeremy Padower. I mean, he's a huge name in the action figure stuff, a guy I've looked up to for many, many years. And to now be able to have his phone number, be able to text him and say, hey, what's up, Jeremy? What's going on? Is a pretty cool experience there. So definitely made some connections there, but really, I would say like any industry, there's not a lot of free product. I mean, it's not the 80s anymore where, hey, let me take you out to dinner. Let me wine and dine you. Those days, I think every organization.
I thought you wanted to keep things positive. You wanted to keep the
I know. I know. It's tough.
All right. Are you ready for the grand finale?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Well, that was perfect because you talked about that comment, the first comment you got. So
it can't be worse than that. It can't be worse than that.
It's kind of ties to that.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So finally, like really the $1 million question is like, if your house was on fire and you could only save one action figure from your collection, which one would it be? And why would it be so hard to choose?
It wouldn't be hard for me to choose, actually. And I've got this questioned a lot over the years, and it all goes back to sentimental nostalgia, everything else. Like you might think it's that He-Man figure, it's worth the most.
Yep.
That's not. I mean, it's worth the most, but not worth the most to me. My figure, and it's my one grail item. I talked about trying to get a few older things. It would be a mint on card version of it, but I have a minty loose one. It is the very first Ultimate Warrior figure ever from the LJ and WWE line back in the day. I still remember as a kid getting that and how big of a deal that was for me. And it's still a huge deal all these years later. I mean, I look at that, it's like my childhood in an action figure. I mean, it's such an important piece to me, and not just in my collection, but my life. I mean, I don't know. It's like, I always get goosebumps when I even talk about it. It's like a defining moment of your life, which seems really weird in action figures, a defining moment of your life, but it carries on into snowballing to what you have around me. And I don't know if a lot of that would have connected with that without that. So, I mean, that would be it. I would grab that very easily. I could probably grab that He-Man on the way. It's on the way, so I could probably get it, but I would go to that one first. I got two hands. I mean, might as well grab one of one.
I can grab it back and then just...
Don't forget the kids. I mean, come on.
They got legs. I can use them.
It's kind of funny. I mean, it's I'm looking at your display case, and I think about for my lunchbox, sort of same thing. Like, do you put your favorites up front? Is that kind of?
Usually, yeah, that's usually kind of. I always say this guy's a front rower and this guy's a back rower, and I'll do sometimes that. Yeah, we all have that no matter what collection. It'd be like, this figure's probably going to be the back of the bottom shelf is where he's going to probably give you my collection. It's a tough road to get out from there.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, it is truly been a pleasure chatting with you. I mean, just your passion is authentic. I mean, you're living and breathing it. You're the genuine article. So it's been a pleasure for us, and glad to see your channel growing, and hopefully we'll contribute a little bit to that. Kind of for the sign off, again, for those listening, Kyle Peterson is an action figure collector with thousands of action figures in his collection. Maybe a Guinness Book World Record holder someday. I don't know, but you'll find him on YouTube. His channel is Kyle Peterson 1980, or the upgraded version 2.0 Kyle Peterson. What's the name of your book, Kyle?
It'd be The Complete Guide to the Jakks Classic Superstars. Just search my name on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It'll pop up there, but yeah.
Outstanding. So thanks again. If you liked what you heard today on collectibles.com Unscripted, make sure you like, follow, and please subscribe to the podcast. And be sure to check out collectibles.com, where you can hang out with hundreds of collectors just like you.